dive in. Historically, our town meetings always started at 7:30, so we started at 7. So, is this the stuff from the CPC? Okay, great. Yeah, no, when I was a judge, I could never accept envelopes. Yeah, as a moderator, there's no rules in that. Oh, interesting. Yeah, we go right up to 11. But you watch. I mean, we have crazy stuff. I mean, we're not as sophisticated. I've heard from Phil Sweeney and others that you guys have a very engaged electorate. And I would love to see that. We're learning. We're still on the learning curve. Yeah, I'd love. When is your town meeting? Are you done? Oh, okay. Thanks, Ned. Thanks for joining us. Ned, do you mind if I just introduce you? Oh, you really want to be modest, huh? Well, what if I do? What if I want to? I'm just so excited that you're here. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, no, I'd like to do it too. And there's... Yeah. Okay. See you later, Ned. And it's Obara? Continued session of the Norfolk Annual Town Meeting will come to order. Good evening. My name is David Winslow. I really concerning as your moderator. For those of you who were not here last night, just a quick recap of some of the ground rules. This year it's a little bit different from past years. If you wish to speak to an article, just come down and line up at either the yes microphone if you wish to speak in favor of something, or at the no microphone, the red microphone if you wish to speak against something. Tonight, because we don't have an overflow room, we actually picked up our question mark mic right there in the middle. So you don't have a position, just want to ask a question or ask a question about procedure, line right up at the white microphone. And there's no need to wait to be recognized to come to the microphone. In fact, if it's a heated debate, all the more reason just to line right up and I'll call you in turn, taking turn. Under our town meeting procedures bylaw, there's a couple of requirements for debate. Everybody has 5 minutes the first time they speak in an article, and then after that it's 3 minutes. I'll let you know when your time is nearing an end. No one can speak more than twice on any motion. So if there's a motion and then a motion to amend, that's a separate motion. You can speak up to 2 times on that. The exceptions are to answer a question, to correct a misstatement, or to raise a point of order, but it's basically 2 times speaking per motion, 5 minutes the first time, 3 minutes the second time, and the point of that is to give everybody a chance equally to participate in the debate. You have a how-to guide, which gives you some tips about the debate and also how to amend any articles. I have here printed forms at the base of the podium, so if you'd like to change something that's on the floor for debate, just come forward. I will help you out with the form and tell you how to file an amendment. All amendments have to be in writing, and then I will call on you if there's a second so that you can speak in support of your proposed amendment. And then lastly, how to cut off debate is also listed on the reverse side of the how-to guide for town meeting. The pending article is Article 35. Mr. O'Barra, advisory board.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. We are on page 9 of the warrant, Article 35, and I bring your attention to that because we have some slight change in language. Mr. Moderator, I move to amend Section L7A, allowed uses, in the C6 district of the Norfolk zoning bylaws to include, quote, medical/veterinary research facility, end quote, and, quote, medical veterinary treatment facility, end quote.
Thank you, Mr. O'Barra. Advisory board.
Without repeating the article verbatim, basically this is just to make the C6 district a little more friendly. This is probably also, well, obviously to include the Southwood Hospital area, to make it more friendly for possible future development.
Thank you, Mr. O'Barra. Mr. Roach for the planning board. The planning board's recommendation on a zoning change.
Planning board recommends the approval of the article. I guess there's probably about a little confusion on this because we had actually approved with a friendly amendment on this to include the word medical research and medical treatment facilities as defined under the Federal Public Health Service Act as amended. I'm not sure if you guys got that.
Thank you, Mr. Roach. The motion on the floor is on Article 35 to amend Section L7A, allowed uses in the C6 district of the Norfolk zoning bylaws to include medical/veterinary research facility and medical/veterinary treatment facility. Is there anybody from, this is a proposal from the zoning bylaw study committee. Does the zoning bylaw study committee wish to speak in favor of Article 35? Beyond
do have a little concern about this. I would like to know what checks and balances there are going to be. Is there any through the Board of Health or whatever? Pondville hospital area has had a lot of contamination. We are close to abutting that particular property. We have wells at that site. We don't have town water. What controls, if any, are there going to be in this type of research, medical research or medical veterinary research, and possibly, too, being a dog lover, I certainly hope there isn't any type of animal research, live animal research going to take place there. So my question to the town is, what controls do we have over allowing something like this? Is there any controls as to contamination, as to what takes place there? Does it go through the Board of Health? Could somebody answer me to offer those protections to me, please?
Thank you, Ms. Connors. Anybody else wish to speak for or against Article 35? Dr. Nelson, Board of Health.
Hi, Mark Nelson, Board of Health. Yeah, there's a lot of controls and a lot of statutes that are regulated by the state of Massachusetts concerning medical and veterinary research facilities. Also, there's environmental consultants that are called in to these facilities. And the fact is that property actually has been a medical research facility and a medical treatment facility already. Right. So, you know, as far as safety goes, there's different levels of safety, and I'll cover that later on Article 51, which has to do with how that could also be regulated by the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection. So there's different laws, there's different regulations, and all the ones that are proposed for this are well within the Commonwealth's regulations.
Thank you, Dr. Nelson. Anybody else wish to speak in favor? Ms. Connors, just go to a microphone, please.
So you're saying the state has and everything, Dr. Nelson. What I'm asking for is, what is our town going to do about approving a facility like this? Does it go through the Board of Health? Does it go to Planning Board? You're not answering me that. You're saying the state this or that.
Right. Well, there are regulations.
Mr. Nelson, you may proceed.
Okay. There are regulations as far as the Board of Health, and I can check into the exact ones for you, but I'm sure that they're part and parcel with the
But
state.
you're a new member of the Board of
Ms.
Health,
Connors,
sir.
Ms. Connors, please have a seat. Mr. Nelson, have a seat.
Did I do something wrong?
No, you've spoken twice, Nancy. We got to move on.
Come on, my husband puts up with me.
Does anybody else wish to speak in favor or against Article 35? Mr. Boucher? Feel free to line up at the microphones with a question.
With a question, and the question, Bob Boucher, Fleetwood Drive. The original warrant article specified medical research and/or treatment facilities. The motion that was made is medical veterinary research facility or treatment facilities. Is that an expansion of the original article, and is it legal?
An article can only be within the scope of the original article. The question would be, does the word medical comprehend people as well as non-people or not? You wish to speak to that, Mr. Boucher?
It didn't to me when I read the article and then saw the advisory board recommendation with the word veterinary research in there, or veterinary. It seemed that was an expansion of the article to me. Medical meant human to me.
Thank you, Mr. Boucher. You raising a point of order on that point?
Yes.
Thank you. On the point of order, is town council here, Mr. Aspley? No, he's supposed to be scheduled to be here at 7 o'clock. Thank you. One of the moderator's jobs is to make sure that the scope of the article does not expand. An article can shrink in scope, but it cannot expand. Part of the reason for that is to give fair notice to people who may choose not to come here at town meeting because they may not have a problem, for example, with medical research and medical treatment. The word veterinary has been added into the proposed article. In my view, as pointed out by Mr. Boucher, that would be an expansion of the scope of the article. And for that reason, on the point of order, I will rule the amendment out of order. If the advisory board wishes to place the article as printed in the warrant before town meeting, I certainly will
Mr. Moderator, may I make a proposal to defer discussion until we can have the George Hall's opinion? That will not be very long.
Town Council, Mr. Hall, if I could see you here at the podium. Thank you. The ruling of the moderator stands. If the advisory board would like to move approval of the warrant as printed, the article is printed in the warrant, I'll certainly allow that to proceed. Otherwise, we can... Mr. Garrity.
Do we have provisions in our rules for challenging the call of the chair?
No, you do not, Mr. Garrity. Under statute, the moderator has the power to run town meeting as the moderator sees fit, consistent with our bylaws. You have the ruling of the chair. The scope of veterinary, in my view, exceeds medical, but I invite, if anybody wishes to move the article as printed in the warrant. Does anybody wish to put that motion before town meeting? Mr. Bullock, Building Commissioner.
I'd like to move it forward and then have the planning board do their substitute motion.
Sorry, Mr. Bullock, I don't understand. You want to do what?
The original article, the way it was written in the warrant, to move that forward, and then the planning board has a substitute motion that they would like to insert medical in front of treatment.
Hey, just a moment, Mr. Bullock.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Bullock. Consistent with the town's practices, I'll call on the advisory board to place a motion on the floor before town meeting. Mr. Sterling for the advisory board.
Point of clarification.
Just a moment,
Moderator,
Mr. Roach. I'll have a motion first.
Mr. Moderator, the advisory board hasn't had an opportunity to meet on this and vote on it, and in the absence of a vote, we're unable to make a motion at this time. It is the... so if you'd like to call a brief halt in the meeting, we will call ourselves to order and vote on an action at this point.
Thank you. Mr. Sterling, we'll have a recess in a moment. Well, why do we have this be deferred until we'll just take it out of order and put it after Article 40? Want to do that? Okay, I'll take that as a motion. Is there a second? To defer Article 35 to after Article 40 to give the advisory board a chance to confer and decide whether it wants to affirmatively move or IP Article 35. Is there any further discussion on the motion to defer Article 35 until after Article 40? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. It is a majority vote. Article 36, Mr. Benton, Advisory Board.
See if we can get the evening going here. Article 36. Mr. Moderator, I move we approve Article 36 as written in the warrant.
Thank you. Mr. Benton, Advisory Board, with a recommendation.
The Articles 36 through 48, the upcoming 13 articles, continue to deal with various changes in the zoning bylaws. These have been proposed by the Zoning Bylaw Study Committee, and as you recall from our discussion last night, that's composed of various members of all the land use boards, has representation. The intention of the zoning bylaw changes in Articles 36 to 40 is they're all fairly consistent in what they're proposing, so I'll just kind of do the pitch for all of them in one here. The intention of the zoning bylaw changes in Articles 36 to 40 is to provide greater flexibility to the appropriate oversight board regarding development in the commercial districts. As noted, though, in Article 37, we'll be proposing to defer that one to June 16th in order to meet the public hearing requirements. And then in Articles 41 to 48, the intention is to streamline the approval process by moving certain special permitting processes for certain activities in the commercial districts from ZBA to either Planning Board or Board of Selectmen. All of the affected boards are in agreement on these proposed changes in our zoning bylaws. Article 36 provides the Planning Board with exception authority for streetscape requirements in the B1 district, which is in the center of town.
Thank you, Mr. Benton. Mr. Roach, this is a zoning matter. What is the recommendation of the planning board?
Planning Board recommends approval of the article as it provides ease to the applicant, creating flexibility and design the streetscape for the special permits in the B1 district.
Thank you, Mr. Roach. This is an article submitted by the Zoning Bylaw Study Committee. Does the Zoning Bylaw Study Committee wish to speak beyond what's already been presented? Floor is now open for debate. Does anybody wish to speak against Article 36? Anybody wish to speak in favor of Article 36? Mr. Garrity, Board of Selectmen.
I would just note that the articles as printed in the recommendations all end, the new language ends with "or take any action relative thereto," which shouldn't appear in a zoning bylaw. It's kind of an artifact of creating the article, and it should be strict.
Thank you, Mr. Garrity. Last year I ruled that everything after the semicolon, which then precedes or take other action thereto, is not included within the body of the article, but your point is noted. That is not included in the motion before town meeting. Article 36, any further discussion for or against Article 36? Any questions? At the red microphone.
Christina Gleason, Main Street. I have objections to all these changes where it says by special permit by the planning board. I frankly don't understand all of these different changes that are being asked for. But I do know, having lived in this town for over 50 years, that a lot of people have put a lot of work into making the zoning bylaws. And to me, they've worked well through the years. Now, they want to put, it seems to me, they want to change all these bylaws. I don't understand them. I don't understand the chapters, the sections, and the repercussions from all of them. But I do know that we're putting an awful lot of faith into one committee, it seems to me, and I don't think that's right. I think that each section, each one of these little boards has their own specialty, and I think, from what I can understand, that this is allowing all these zoning laws to be changed by special permit. Now, I've gone to different meetings where special permits have been requested. And I go in there and I see mostly empty seats. And once in a while I'll see one or two other people like me who are there, who are strangers, but they must be abutters, so they must be my neighbors. And then I see a little group of people over the side in suits. And they are the ones who have their attaché cases, their charts, their site plans, and they've been studying all these rules because it's money to them. If they can get these bylaws changed, it will be good for them. Now, the people listen to you, and they hear your concerns, and they listen very politely. But most of the time, it's decided on the side of the people who are requesting the special permit, mainly because it's only tweaking these zoning laws a little bit. Well, I feel like I'm in the frog in the hot water on the stove. These zoning laws get tweaked year after year after year, and before you know it, you wake up and you say, well, what happened? What happened to my nice little town that I moved here for? I've had a couple of surprises myself. I live on Main Street. Perhaps you've seen them too. All the trees are gone across the street from me. A little bit down to the center of town, there's a building that I could reach out on the sidewalk and touch. Little tweaks of zoning laws. This makes it easier. This makes it to streamline the process. I don't want it streamlined. I want each thing to be heard individually. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gleason. Anybody wish to speak at the green microphone in favor of Article 36? Mr. Bullock, Building Commissioner?
These aren't taking away the rules. These are basically just giving the flexibility during that site plan process that the applicant can stay within a committee that actually understands the whole project and has gone through each step of the project. Some of these, they have to go out to the Zoning Board of Appeals, who hasn't had any input to this project at all from the beginning. The Planning Board has probably the best knowledge of what's going on that site, and that's why we feel as though it would be best if they heard those arguments and decided whether or not some of the changes would be appropriate for that project. The project that you're talking about on Main Street and Borden Street is really the first project that has actually been built to the zoning bylaws that have been in place for quite some time. And people have commented that to me a number of times, that, you know, why is it so close to the street? But that's the zoning that's in place today. We're saying that, you know, if somebody wants to do it just a little bit differently, they would be able to go to the planning board, and in that process, through an extra hearing that they would have to publicize separately to get a change, to get a special permit to change it from the stringent bylaws, and it gives some flexibility to the applicants and to the different projects that are coming in town. So,
Thank you, Mr. Bullock. Does anybody wish to speak against Article 36? Mr. Tarazi.
Mike Tarasi. It's not so much to speak against it, but Mrs. Gleason made a very, very good point. A lot of the decisions that are made, you know, right or wrong, I'm not questioning that go before these special committees, special permits, and so on. Usually, the abutter, the notices are usually confined to the immediate abutters. I won't get into the abutter rules. I think we all know them. I think that we're advanced. I've brought this up before. I think that we are advanced enough today with our electronic technology that in any type of permitting, any types of applications that are going before any of the boards, any special permits or anything else, should be posted on the, you know, and kept up to date on the Norfolk website, you know, Virtual Norfolk. Because a lot of these special permits and so on, again, I'm not questioning right or wrong right here, are community problems, or will create community problems, or a community concern, and the whole community should be in on it. We should have not just 2 or 3 abutters at these meetings, but the whole community that is concerned, and let's take it from there. Now, I know this isn't the place to bring it up, but I just wanted to make this comment. That's the direction we really should go in, and I applaud Mrs. Gleason for bringing a lot of this to our attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tarazi. Does anybody wish to speak in favor of Article 36 at the green microphone? Anybody else wish to speak against Article 36? Anyone who's not had a chance to speak or ask a question on Article 36? Article 36 is a zoning amendment. It requires a 2/3 vote for approval. If you vote aye or yes, you're voting in favor of changing the zoning as printed in the warrant. If you vote no, you're voting in favor of keeping the zoning as it currently exists in town. All in favor of Article 36, say aye. Aye. Opposed, no? It is a 2/3 vote. Article, and I will count it at the standing request of any 7 voters. Article 38. Mr. Benton, Advisory Board.
Actually, Article 37. I move to defer Article 37 for further discussion until after Article 28.
A moment, thank you. Thank you. The motion's been made and seconded to defer this article until after Article
28.
28. Anything in support of that motion?
This article requires a public hearing, which will be taken prior to the June 16th continuation of town meeting, so we'd like to defer it until that point.
Anybody wish to speak against the amendment to defer until after Article 28 at the end of the town meeting warrant? Article 37. And for the record, Article 36 was approved by a 2/3 vote. It was my misspeak. Article 37, the proposal on the town meeting floor is to defer it until after Article 28 at the end of the warrant. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. It is a majority vote. Article 37 is deferred. Article 38, Mr. Benton, Advisory Board.
Mr. Moderator, I move we approve Article 38 as written in the warrant.
Thank you, Mr. Benton. With the Advisory Board recommendation?
Article 38 provides the Planning Board with exception authority for landscaping requirements in the B1 district.
Thank you. This is a zoning proposal from the Planning Board. Mr. Roach?
Mr. Moderator, similar to the article we had before, Planning Board recommends the approval of this article as it provides ease to the applicant by creating flexibility to design a streetscape for site plans in the B1 district. This language is going to be similar in a few of these coming up. And basically, again, we can talk about it a little later, but again, this just puts some authority under the Planning Board where it would have been under other groups. We're doing the site plan, we're doing the review. Our people are looking at it the same thing as everybody else is looking at it. We're trying to, again, streamline the process, cut down the application process, save a little money for the people involved, developers, so that's where we are.
Thank you, Mr. Roach. This is a zoning bylaw study committee proposal. Does anyone from the zoning bylaw study committee wish to speak in favor of Article 38 beyond what has been stated? Does anybody wish to speak against Article 38? Any further discussion, questions, or debate with respect to Article 38? Article 38 is a zoning proposal. It requires a two-thirds vote. If you vote aye or yes, you're voting in favor of changing the zoning as printed in the warrant. If you vote no, you're voting in favor of keeping the zoning as it currently exists. All in favor of Article 38, say aye. Aye. Opposed, no? No. It is a two-thirds vote. I will count it at the standing request of any 7 voters. Article 39. Mr. Benton, Advisory Board.
Mr. Moderator, I move we approve Article 39 as written in the warrant.
Mr. Benton, Advisory Board recommendation.
Article 39 is similar to Article 38, except it covers the C1 district, which is the 1A 115 area.
Thank you, Mr. Benton. Mr. Roach, this is a Planning Board matter because it is a zoning proposal. What is the Planning Board's recommendation?
Similar recommendation as well. Planning Board recommends the article as it permits flexibility in design landscape and special permits to C1 district.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion or debate with respect to Article 38? Sorry, what? 30. I'm one off tonight. 39. Any further discussion or debate with respect to Article 39? It is a zoning change. It requires a two-thirds vote. If you vote yes, you're voting in favor of adopting the zoning change as printed in the warrant at Article 39. If you vote no, you're voting in favor of keeping the zoning as it currently exists. It requires a two-thirds vote. All in favor of Article 39, say aye. Aye. Opposed, no? No. It is a two-thirds vote. I will count it at the standing request of any 7 voters. Article 40, Mr. Benton.
Mr. Moderator, I move we approve Article 40 as written in the warrant.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Benton. With the Advisory Board recommendation?
Article 40 gives the Planning Board exception authority for the build-to line requirements within the B1 district, which is the center of town.
Thank you, Mr. Roach. This is a zoning matter. What is the Planning Board's recommendation?
Again, the Planning Board recommends approval of this article. Again, this creates flexibility in design of streetscape in the business core of the B1 district.
Thank you, Mr. Roach. This is a zoning bylaw study committee proposal. Any further discussion by the zoning bylaw study committee? Does anybody wish to speak in opposition to Article 40? Any further debate in for or against, or any questions with respect to Article 40? Article 40 is a zoning bylaw change that requires a two-thirds vote. If you vote yes, you're voting in favor of adopting the zoning change as printed in Article 40. If you vote no, you're voting in favor of keeping the zoning as it currently exists. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no? No. It is a two-thirds vote. I will count it at the standing request of any 7 voters. We had deferred earlier Article 35. Mr. O'Barra for the Advisory Board.
Yes, sir, Mr. Moderator. I move to indefinitely postpone Article 35 as printed in the warrant.
Thank you. Mr. O'Barra, is the recommendation from the Advisory Board in support of that motion?
Yes, Mr. Moderator. The Advisory Committee recommends indefinite postponement of Article 35 due to the difference of opinion of scope between the Town Council and Town Moderator.
Mr. O'Barra, the Town Council and the Moderator are unanimous in their view of the scope for your information.
All right. Then I just go back to the original article, and we're going to IP it, we hope.
Thank you, Mr. O'Barra. This is a...
this is being recorded, right, on television? Great, great, great.
That's your argument. You're sticking with it. Is there any further discussion for or against? The motion on the floor on Article 35 is to indefinitely postpone Article 35. Is there any further discussion for or against Article 35 being indefinitely postponed? It requires a majority vote. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. It is a majority vote. Article 41. Mr. Benton, Advisory Board.
Mr. Moderator, I move we approve Article 41 as written in the warrant.
Is there a second? Thank you. Mr. Benton with the Advisory Board recommendation.
This article moves the special permitting authority for drive-up windows from the Zoning Board of Appeals to the Planning Board. The purpose of the change is to eliminate redundancy in the site plan approval process, and this has the support of both boards. Articles 41, 42, and 43 all are referencing to changes relative to drive-up windows, just each of the different commercial parts of town.
Thank you. Is there any further recommendation from the Planning Board? Mr. Roach?
As the gentleman stated, Article 41, 2, and 3 all deal with drive-up windows that basically would be going from the ZBA to the Planning Board. This is a design feature which the Planning Board actually reviews as well. So this is a duplicative review, and this is just to simplify the process.
Thank you. And Mr. Roach, just to clarify and save you from jumping back up, so the Planning Board recommendation is to approve 41, 42, and 43 when they come up before town meeting?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Roach. Any further discussion with respect to Article 41, for or against? Article 41 is a zoning change. It requires a two-thirds vote. Mr. Kaliza at the microphone.
Mike Kaliza, Creek Drive. Mr. Moderator. Mike Kaliza, Creek Drive, Chair of the Zoning Board of Appeals. Article 41, 42, and 43, as Mr. Roach mentioned, are articles that deal with drive-up windows. We're in total agreement. Our board voted unanimously to grant all of these reviews to the planning board. It's a duplication of effort. It wastes our time. It wastes the applicant's time. The planning board has the ability to hire consultants to do all the traffic studies. We're basically doing exactly the same thing they do, and it's a total waste of resources, time, money, and we totally recommend that you support Articles 41, 42, and 43.
Thank you, Mr. Kaliza, for the Zoning Board of Appeals. Any further discussion for or against Article 41? Article 41 is a zoning change. It requires a two-thirds vote. If you vote yes, you're voting to change the zoning as reflected in Article 41 in the warrant. If you vote no, you're voting to keep the zoning as it currently is. All in favor of Article 41, say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. It is a two-thirds vote. I will count it at the standing request of any 7 voters. Article 42, Mr. Benton, Advisory Board.
Mr. Moderator, I move we approve Article 42 as written in the warrant.
Thank you. Mr. Benton with the Advisory Board recommendation.
Same change as last article, except it relates to the C1 district.
Thank you. The Planning Board, for the record, recommends approval. Any further discussion with respect to Article 42? Anybody wish to speak for or against Article 42? Article 42 is a zoning change. It requires a two-thirds vote. You vote aye or yes, you're voting in favor of changing the zoning as printed in the warrant. If you vote no, you're voting to keep the zoning as it currently exists. It requires a two-thirds vote. All in favor of Article 42, say aye. Aye. Opposed, no? It's a two-thirds vote. I will count it at the request of any 7 voters. Article 43, Mr. Benton.
Mr. Moderator, I move we approve Article 43 as written in the warrant.
Recommendation of the Advisory Committee?
The third leg of the 3 articles, and this one is for the C1 off-highway district.
Thank you. The recommendation of the Planning Board is for approval. Any further discussion with respect to Article 43? Any debate for or against Article 43? Article 43 is a zoning bylaw change. It requires a two-thirds vote. All in favor of Article 43, say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. It is a two-thirds vote. I will count it at the standing request of any 7 voters. Article 44, Mr. Benton.
Mr. Moderator, I move we approve Article 44 as written in the warrant.
Thank you. Mr. Benton with the Advisory Board recommendation.
We recommend approval of this article and the companion Article 45 This article moves the special permitting authority for telecommunications and cellular towers from the ZBA to the planning board. And again, similar to the prior 3 articles, eliminates a redundancy in the site plan approval process. Article 44 relates to the wireless overlay district in B1, and Article 45 relates to the wireless overlay district in C1.
Thank you, Mr. Benton. This is a zoning matter. Mr. Roach, if you could share with us the recommendations on both of these articles.
Planning board also recommends the approval of the transfer of the authority from to the planning board. It'll eliminate, again, duplicate review. This is going to be similar on Article 45 and 46 as well. Planning board's recommendation is on all 3 articles.
Thank you, Mr. Roach. Any further discussion in favor or against Article 44? Article 44 is a zoning change. Mr. Bullock at the green microphone on Article 44.
I just want to let everyone know, right now we have wireless overlay districts, and actually I think this was in the zoning for the ZBA before we had these districts actually designated. Now that we have these areas designated, and this is the only place a wireless tower can go, basically you have to go and get a site plan done for each one of these wireless towers or additions to it for the equipment that would be put on the ground for those wireless towers. So that's why we figured that there wasn't a necessary for the ZBA to hear it all over again, since those overlay districts designate where this equipment can go, and the planning board would be hearing it already. So.
Thank you, Mr. Bullock. Any further discussion for or against Article 44? Any questions with respect to Article 44? Mr. Kaliza, Zoning Board of Appeals.
Again, 44, 45, and 46 are articles that deal with the same issue. I'd like to reaffirm what Mr. Bullock and Mr. Roach have identified and add one other point. The Planning Board does conduct public hearings for abutters. So if anyone has concerns about these issues, they go through the same process that we would have had gone through. So people who live next to these overlay districts have every opportunity to come in and weigh in on their thoughts about these overlay districts.
Thank you, Mr. Kaliza. Anybody wish to speak against Article 44? Mr. Tarazi.
The only reason I said that I'm speaking against is because I didn't want to walk all the way over there to the question microphone. So I'll ask my question in a very negative manner. Now, here's what you're laughing.
I am.
Here's what's going on here. These special permits, which is what I have a problem with all the way through this, is that we're going to be allowing special permits. That sounds all innocent right now, and it may be innocent, but I don't like the idea of everything, here we have a bunch of rules, we have a bunch of variances, regulations, standards, and so on, that can be, as Mrs. Gleason said, stepped over the line just a little bit with a little tweak to give this developer, these are all special considerations for developers, by the way, to give these developers a little extra edge to do their developing. So where my question comes in, and this isn't where we're going to do this, but I should hope that before the special meeting in June, I guess it is, that enough of us get together to get a petition up so that we will be notified on a town-wide basis for all of these special permits, all of these applications that are going in, because trust me when I tell you that just because something's happening down on Holdwork Street doesn't mean that it won't affect you at the other end of Cleveland Street. This has been a problem with us for the longest time, and I think that as a community, we have to start to be aware of the impact that perhaps, I hope not, but perhaps these special permits will do. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Tarazi. Article 44, any further discussion, questions, or debate? Article 44 is a zoning change, requires a 2/3 vote. If you vote yes, you're voting in favor of changing the zoning as reflected in Article 44. If you vote no, you're voting in favor of keeping the zoning as it currently exists. All in favor of Article 44, say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. It is a 2/3 vote. I will count it at the standing request of any 7 voters. Article 45, Mr. Benton, Advisory Board.
Mr. Moderator, I move we approve Article 45 as written in the warrant.
Thank you. Mr. Benton, with the advisory board recommendation?
Similar to 44, it's just for the C1 district.
Thank you. We have the planning board's recommendation is in favor of Article 45 as printed. Any further discussion or debate with respect to Article 45, for, against, or any questions? The zoning article, it requires a two-thirds vote. If you vote yes, you're voting in favor of changing the zoning as printed in the warrant. If you vote no, you're voting to keep the zoning as is. All in favor of Article 45, say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. It is a two-thirds vote. Again, I will count it at the standing request of any 7 voters. Article 46. Mr. Benton, Advisory Board.
Mr. Moderator, I move we approve Article 46 as written in the warrant.
Thank you. With the recommendation, Mr. Benton?
We recommend approval of 46. This article moves the special permitting authority for wireless communications facility equipment building in Wireless Communications Overlay District for B1 from the Zoning Board of Appeals to the Planning Board.
Thank you. And we have the Planning Board recommendation is in support of Article 46. Any further discussion, debate, questions on Article 46? Article 46 is a zoning change, requires a two-thirds vote. If you vote yes, you're voting in favor of adopting the zoning change as printed in the warrant. If you vote no, you're voting to keep the zoning as it currently exists. All in favor of Article 46, say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. It is a two-thirds vote. Again, I will count it at the standing request of any 7 voters. Article 47, Mr. Benton, Advisory Board.
Mr. Moderator, I move we approve Article 47 as written in the warrant.
Mr. Benton, with the recommendation of the Advisory Board.
This article deletes restaurants, which serves beer, wine, etc., from special permit uses from ZBA and moves it for B1 and C1 districts and moves it under the Board of Selectmen. So again, it's not really changing, similar to the question on articles that we just passed, the changes in 41 to 46. It doesn't change the fact that you get a special permit. It's just who is doing the approval of it. So this is moving it from ZBA to Board of Selectmen, and both boards are in favor of this change.
Thank you, Mr. Benton. This is a zoning change recommended. The Planning Board recommendation, Mr. Roach?
Planning Board also recommends this. Where we are? There we are. Planning Board recommends the approval as the Board of Selectmen issues the liquor licenses, and the current requirement would be duplicative.
Thank you, Mr. Roach. Any further discussion or debate with respect to Article 47? Mr. Kaliza, Zoning Board of Appeals.
Last night, as a reference, we, as a town meeting, approved Article 31, which removed the Zoning Board of Appeals from granting a special permit for granting liquor licenses, and this is just a refinement of that, which includes the B1 district. So we've already approved this, and this Article 47 just, for some reason, designates the B1 district and clarifies Article 31.
Thank you, Mr. Kaliza. Any further discussion or debate, for or against? Any questions with respect to Article 47? Article 47 is a zoning change. It requires a two-thirds vote. If you vote yes, you're voting in favor of changing the zoning as printed in the warrant. If you vote no, you're voting against that and to keep the zoning as it currently exists. Requires a two-thirds vote, as I indicated. All in favor of Article 47, say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. It is a two-thirds vote. I will count it at the standing request of any 7 voters. Article 48, Mr. Benton, Advisory Board.
Mr. Moderator, I move we approve Article 48 as printed in the warrant.
Thank you. Advisory Board recommendation, Mr. Benton.
This is the same change as in Article 47, except this applies to the C1 district.
Thank you. Planning Board recommendation, Mr. Roach.
Planning Board also recommends this approval as the article is a repeat of Article 31.
Thank you, Mr. Roach. Any further discussion, debate, or questions with respect to Article 48? Mr. Kaliza, Zoning Board of Appeals.
The ZBA unanimously supports this article.
Thank you, Mr. Kaliza. Does anybody wish to speak against Article 48? Any further questions or debate on Article 48? It's a zoning article. It requires a two-thirds vote. If you vote yes, you're voting to change the zoning as printed in the warrant. If you vote no, you're voting to keep the zoning as it currently exists. All in favor of Article 48, say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. It is a two-thirds vote. I will count it at the standing request of any 7 voters. Article 49 was previously dispatched by the consent calendar by majority vote. Article 50, Mr. Sterling, Advisory Board.
Mr. Moderator, I move we approve Article 50 as printed in the warrant.
Thank you. The motion's been made and seconded. Mr. Sterling, with the recommendation of the Advisory Board.
Mr. Moderator, Mr. Moderator, this motion puts the Central Business District under the 43D approval process, the facilitated approval process that requires that the town react quickly when a development proposal is made, and we encourage that it be approved.
Thank you, Mr. Sterling. Any further discussion or debate with respect to Article 50? Mr. Lutz at the red microphone.
Mr. Moderator, David Lutz from Pondview Road. I'd ask that this be put to the end of the warrant. At this point, we postponed we delayed a article last night that would set up the committee that would review these things. I think that would be appropriate to debate that before we debate this. Therefore, I'd ask that this be moved to the end of the warrant.
Are you moving to defer Article 50 to the end of the warrant?
Yes, I am.
Is there a second? The motion has been made and seconded to defer Article 50 to the end of the warrant. Mr. Luce, do you wish to speak in favor of the motion at the green microphone? Thank you, Mr. Lutz.
Just trying to speed things up. As I said when I made the motion, last night we had a discussion about the committee that was going to be set up to review these projects. That may engender some discussion on the floor when we get to that at the end of the warrant. I think that we should delay this article until we get to that point. I do have some comments on this, but I'd prefer to wait until we've set up the committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lutz. Mr. Sterling at the red microphone.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Mr. Moderator, we have identified the June 16th meeting as one that is going to primarily focus on the budget. The budget is going to be a painful and lengthy discussion. Much as I appreciate the need to time all this even better and allow all the necessary discussion, I really fear we're overloading our agenda for the 16th, and thus I urge the town not to defer discussion of this article.
Thank you. The motion on the floor is to defer Article 50 until the end of the warrant. Any further discussion for or against? Mr. Nicodemus.
Yes, the Economic Development Committee would prefer that this article go forward tonight. It is an issue of expediting permitting. There are grant funds available that we would like to apply for. We think that it is exactly what was presented. I'm not going to go through the PowerPoint presentation unless requested. For the Southwood District last June, we did get 2/3 of the grant monies for that, and we would like to proceed with this, and we think that we should vote on it tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Nicodemus. The motion on the floor is to defer Article 50 to the end of the town meeting warrant, which likely will occur in June at this rate. If you vote yes, you're voting to defer, to delay Article 50 in the order of the warrant. If you vote no, we will deal with Article 50 right now. Is there any further discussion or debate with respect to whether or not to defer Article 50? Mr. Lutz, for the second time.
I appreciate Mr. Sterling's concern about the June meeting. I was prepared to speak in favor of the amendment, the article last night and move forward on this, and was prepared to debate it tonight. I think we need to delay it. The committee that was being proposed last night was the authority that was going to control this process for the town. It would be appropriate for us to stage it in such a way that we had a committee in place before we discuss what we do next.
Thank you, Mr. Lutz. Any further discussion or debate on whether or not to defer Article 50? Mr. Sneed at the red microphone.
Yes, I believe the adoption of the expedited permitting process for this area is independent of the committee, which may or may not be established to be part of the review process. So I believe that we should move ahead with discussion of this article and hopefully the approval of it, regardless of whatever process may be put in place at some future point to assist in the expediting process itself.
Thank you, Mr. Sneed. Does anybody wish to speak in favor of the motion to defer? Mr. Tallerman at the green microphone.
I think small correction there, seeing you can't do anything under 43D till you have the other piece in place that's deferred anyway. I don't think that's actually correct, Pat. I think there's no reason to push this ahead while we're still waiting for the other pieces. There's been some concern that maybe this includes too many lots, that it shouldn't anyway. There's no harm whatsoever, because you can't do one without the other.
Thank you, Mr. Talaman. Any further discussion or debate with respect to the pending motion, which is to defer Article 50 to the end of the town meeting warrant? Anybody who's not yet had a chance to speak on this motion that wishes to speak? If you vote yes, you're voting to defer, to delay Article 50 to the end of the town meeting warrant, likely June at this rate. If you vote no, you're voting to keep Article 50 in the order of the warrant as it now stands. We'll deal with it directly. It's a majority vote required. All in favor of the motion to defer, say aye. Excuse me, just a moment, strike that. I have Mr. Bullock at the red microphone.
I don't think you have to have this, the board in place that we were going to look at voting on earlier. We already have the 43D in place for Southwood without that board in place. We do have time to make sure that this, we have time tonight to debate the issue here on this article and whether or not the town, should move forward on it. The article before on the board, I think, is just a technicality on whether or not there's 10 members or a quorum of 6. Other than that, I think the gist of the article is accurate. So I think that's just a matter of time to that's going to get approved.
Thank you, Mr. Bullock. Sorry for missing you there. Any further discussion or debate on the motion to defer Article 50 to the end of the warrant? If you vote yes, you're voting to delay, to defer Article 50 to the end of the warrant. If you vote no, you're voting to deal with Article 50 right now in the order that it appears. Requires a majority vote. All in favor of the motion to defer, say aye. Aye. All opposed, say no. No. It is not a majority vote. Article 50 remains before town meeting. Any further discussion or debate for or against Article 50 is printed in the warrant. Mr. Lutz.
Just so I understand this, this would include the entire B1 district in the 43D program. Is that my understanding? If so, I would like someone to explain why we're proposing to build a wastewater treatment plant to encourage expanded development in the B1 district, which said wastewater treatment plant, which would not occur for several years. At the same time, we're offering 43D expedited permitting, which would basically offer permitting in 180 days as soon as we adopt this. My understanding is if we adopt this, the day that our program kicks into place, every new district we add, the permitting goes in place immediately. In other words, we would be offering 180-day permitting on all the sites that are listed in this, which is the entire B1 district, immediately. In the meantime, I did hear a discussion last night about how we needed to have a sewer system in downtown so that the lots could be built out to their maximum. If someone could explain that to me, that'd be great. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Lutz. Anybody wish to speak in favor? Mr. Nicodemus, Economic Development Committee.
Yes, what I'd like to say is, by adopting this tonight, does not put B1 district as a 41-3 district. It then has to go to the interagency board, which can't happen until October, November of 2009. It then has to be accepted by the interagency board, which means that it cannot actually become accepted until probably, as it occurred last year with Southwood, until sometime in February, March of 2010, and then we have 6 months from the time that the interagency board accepts it to get all of the actions in place. We are trying to long-range plan this, and we believe that it is appropriate, that we can answer these questions, we can resolve it. There is a number of procedural issues that have to go forward that could take as long as 6 months to a year after September of 2009.
Thank you, Mr. Nicodemus. Mr. Lutz at the red microphone for the second time on this motion.
My question was whether or not these sites are the ones that we're planning on building a sewer system for to allow for maximum build-out. It's not 6 months, that's 2, 3, 5 years before we get a sewer system in place.
Thank you, Mr. Lutz. Any further discussion at the green microphone? Mr. Nicodemus, anybody at the green microphone? Mr. Nicodemus for the second time on this motion.
The issue here, in our opinion, is to get the expedited permitting. Whether we have a sewer system or not, expedited permitting still is a program worth implementing in the B1 district. The sewer system program, in all fairness, if it were be stimulus funded, could happen within a year, and we expect to push in that direction.
Thank you, Mr. Nicodemus. Anybody at the red microphone who wishes to speak against? Mr. Tallerman.
Yes, with all due respect to Mr. Nicodemus, I just don't think that that's how permitting works. Permitting works over we can't turn people away if they want to use 43D, assuming on the outside it's 8 months or so, great. We have someone using a program that could provide some benefits, but we're not giving them the crown jewel of it because the crown jewel won't be ready. And I think, quite frankly, having done quite a bit of work on getting projects ready for stimulus, highly unlikely. It won't be shovel-ready. We're looking at years out for potential sewer, which, even if it's a good thing, wouldn't dovetail well with this. We're missing these things are going to miss each other. If sewer is a good idea, we'll be, flushing it down the toilet because applicants could be coming in without the benefits, so-called, that sewer might provide.
Thank you, Mr. Tallerman. The motion before town meeting is to approve Article 50 as printed in the warrant. Does anybody wish to speak at the green microphone in favor of Article 50? Anybody at the red microphone? Mr. Tarazi?
So far, all I've heard from the proponents of this is woulda, coulda, and shoulda, and we're talking so far ahead that this really isn't an article for us to be voting on positively tonight. There are too many things that can happen in this town over a period of 2 or 3 years to be considering such an expansive, and we're all looking at Article 50. That's a very expansive list, and I think that we should just pass on this tonight, and if it's a worthwhile thing, it can come up the next time. We'll still all be here.
Thank you, Mr. Tarazi. Mr. Roach at the green microphone.
Dave Roach, Planning Board. This is, the 43D process here would be a tool for development, possible development in the downtown. Even if you approve this, these landowners of all these parcels here would have to sign on to this. This is only the beginning process of this. Unless we know who's going to sign into this process, we don't know how we're going to develop this wastewater treatment plant, sewer water treatment plant. But, you know, all I've heard is the opponents of this tonight basically saying, why are we doing it? Why don't we sit back and, you know, why are we rushing into it? This is planning. This is what we do. We plan. We plan for the future. We're trying to plan for the future. This is a tool that allows us to do that. This doesn't set anything cast in stone at this point. What it does is just starts the process in place for these potential landowners, potential developers, to get involved with this process, to move it forward, to allow them to be in this 43D process.
Thank you, Mr. Roach. Any further discussion at the red microphone? Mr. Tarazi for the second time on this motion.
Yeah, we can call that planning for the future. We can also call it setting us up like pawns on a chessboard to be pushed around and moved around if we vote yes on this now. I'm not sure exactly how the permitting process would work, but if we're talking about the 180-day period, an applicant comes in and says, well, here's my application. Well, they're not going to have sewage in a lot of these places, so we're going to have to shoot them down. Where's the expediting being done? And again, we're shoveling sand against the tide here because it doesn't make sense with what we have to work with right now. And as far as planning against the future, there's a point where La La Land and J Dreams and so on are anybody's dreamlike future, but we're not here to talk about dreams.
Thank you, Mr. Tarazi. At the green microphone, sir, state your name and your street.
Patrick Toohey, Applewood Road. I've been listening to this. I didn't come to last night's meeting, my apologies, but I've been listening to this, and this gentleman here, he's right. We're planning for the future, and if developers want to come to this town and introduce smart development, not just garbage development, smart development, they want to see the town that has a plan for the future, not someone that's sitting on their hands waiting for the perfect plan to come to them. They need to plan to bring the developers here to get smart development to come in. Smart development that we can dictate. And maybe they can contribute to a wastewater treatment plant if we have a good plan in place. So all the opponents of this article, I just hate to say, you naysayers, you don't want the town to move forward a little bit and to bring in a little bit more smart development and smart revenue. I don't understand it.
Thank you, Mr. Chole. At the red microphone, Ms. Pine, or just a question? Thank you. At the question microphone, Ms. Pine, just state your name and your street, please.
I'm Betsy Pine. I live on Seekonk Street. I have a question, and I don't know whether I'm for or against this article, but my question is, last year, we voted this district or this kind of zoning for Pondville Hospital, and it was explained that this was necessary because this was such an important site, and it was going to be sold, and we had to have this expedited permitting process. And when I look at this huge list of all these properties, is this what we're voting on primarily? Is this expedited permitting process? And what has been wrong with the way we've done it in the past? Is it really that necessary that we're in such a hurry that that's what we need? And is that all we're doing, is just expediting the permitting process?
Thank you, Ms. Pine. Does anybody wish to speak for or against Article 50 or to answer the questions presented? Yes, please.
Yeah. Stephen McLean, Planning Board. The 43D process is not a requirement once it's passed. Anyone that comes in and develops within the town center or the Southwood property could just do our standard subdivision process if they choose to. They don't have to do it through the 43D process. The 43D process doesn't eliminate any of the approvals that are required. It's a shared responsibility between the developer and the boards within the town. Most of the developers that come before, at least the board that I'm on, the long-term process is usually dragged out by the applicant, not the board. And if they come before the board and they know that a decision is going to be made within 180 days, they are going to respond a lot quicker when things are asked of them. And the board will respond quicker when things are asked of the board. So when the state started coming up with this 43D process, this is a new process. There's a lot of towns that are working on this right now, we are on the forefront of this. And there have been no applications before the town for the Southwood property yet. But this is going to become pretty much a standard, I think. A lot of towns are working on this right now. Did I answer the question that you asked?
Thank you, Mr. McLean. Any further discussion for or against Article 50? At the no microphone, Mr. Tallerman for the second time on this motion.
It's not a question of being a naysayer about this article. I very much favor getting town center developed because it's been an eyesore for way too long. What we know is that every time we throw a new process at town center, it doesn't work. Look at it. That's the problem. Throwing a new process didn't help us with Southwood either. The question here and the opposition to it is, let's do something cohesively. Let's match it up to that sewer plan. Don't do it piecemeal. Throw this at it now, where someone could come in and use it tomorrow or as soon as it's adopted, and then wait 5 years for sewer, and then that changes it all again. If we can't put a cohesive plan together that all works at once, then we're not addressing it in the right way. You need a comprehensive plan, and we're just throwing the new process du jour at it one piece at a time, and that's not a way to develop such an important site.
Thank you, Mr. Tallerman. Mr. Hathaway, Town Administrator at the green microphone.
Jack Hathaway, Evergreen Road, and Town Administrator. First of all, the Southwood property is much different than the center of town. People complain that the Southwood have made comments that the Southwood property hasn't been developed since we've approved the expedited permitting at that location. Well, that's obviously, there are all kinds of issues there. Caritas had some people that were willing to buy that, but they couldn't agree on a price. It was a difference of around $2 million versus $3 million. Obviously, the pollution there is a huge issue. The issue that is facing that property is got nothing to do with the lack of 43D. The benefits that I see from 43D are very important. One is it's a marketing tool for the town. The developers look at Norfolk and they say, all right, we are getting progressive. We are willing to work with developers. We are willing to say, yes, we will give you a yes or no in 180 days. I haven't heard from any of the boards that 180 days is unreasonable, so I am confused as to why there is a reluctance there. 180 days it's 6 months. I think we should be able to say yes or no in 6 months. We're not required to say yes. The other thing it does for us, every grant that we apply for that is paid from the state of Massachusetts, we are based, that is partially based on what we call a Commonwealth Capital Score. And that Commonwealth Capital Score is this checklist that we do that says, yes, we've done expedited permitting, yes, we've done a whole bunch of things already. We've adopted the Community Preservation Act. We have open space development. There are a lot of things that we have. Well, this is another thing that gets us a couple more points on our Commonwealth Capital Score that will give us points towards being awarded grants. We're a very difficult town to be awarded grants because we are a very high income level town. The state, for one reason or another, doesn't like to give us money. But if the farther we can get that Commonwealth Capital Score up, the more readily will be accepted for grants.
Thank you, Mr. Hathaway. Any discussion at the red microphone? Ma'am? Your name and your street, please. AV, is the red mic working? Turn it up. There you go. Thank you, Ms. Whitney. Any further discussion at the green microphone in favor of Article 50? Mr. Kuliza for the Zoning Board of Appeals.
2 points. Number one, to say that 43D hasn't been successful in the Southwood is a bit disingenuous. The country's gone through the biggest economic downturn in the past 50 years. I don't know of any development that is really going forward or being proposed. I think we need to give this some time until the economy turns around. And number two, in terms of the internal workings of our land use boards, the ZBA, the Concom, the Planning Board, the Board of Health have all worked in silos before. No one really knew what was going on in the other boards. This process will, for lack of a better word, force us all to work together, which I think is a good thing. We're going to be talking to one another, examining each other's points of view, and I think we're going to get better projects that will protect the town, and in the long run, this is a better process for better projects for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kaliza. Any further discussion against Article 50? Further discussion in favor of Article 50? Mr. Merlis.
Just at the bottom.
Could you just state your name and your street, please?
Greg Merlis, Long Meadow. At the bottom of the table, it says Article 30. 30. It should say Article 21. Want that changed. In the paragraph, it's 21, and just on the table, it's not correct. So.
It's the Economic Development Committee. Is this a typographical error from the Economic Development Committee, Mr. Nicodemus?
The warrant article written says Article 21. When it was first drafted, Article 21 was Article 30, and it did not get corrected. It should be Article 21 in the table as well as the way it is written in the article.
So you accept as a friendly amendment Mr. Merlis's observation to change after the first paragraph of Article 50, the reference that now reads Article 21 should properly read Article 30.
No, sir.
No?
What I'm saying is that Article 30 is no longer relevant. It should say Article 21 in the article as it does, and in the table, it errantly lists Article 30 instead of Article 21.
Hang on a second. You got to show. Okay, so the observation has been pointed out. In the table, the very last table entry refers to Article 30. Then it says see description, lots approved, Article 30, Article 30. Should all of those references of Article 30 properly read Article 21, Mr. Nicodemus?
Yes, sir.
All of them?
Yes.
Do the Economic Development Committee accept that typographical change as a friendly amendment?
Yes, sir.
Any objection by the town meeting? Thank you. We'll take that. All in favor of the friendly amendment, say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. It is accepted as a majority vote. The references to Article 30 in the table are now amended to be Article 21. Any further discussion for or against Article 50 as amended? Article 50 is to accept the provisions of Chapter 43D of the general laws with respect to the stated parcels. Requires a majority vote. If you vote yes, you're voting in favor of accepting Article 43D for these parcels in the town of Norfolk. If you vote no, you're voting not to accept these and to keep things as they are. All in favor of Article 50, say aye. Aye. Opposed, no? No. It is a majority vote. I will count it at the standing request of any 7 voters. Article 51, Ms. Curl. I have 2 voters standing. Four voters standing. I do not have a sufficient number of standing voters for a counted vote. Ms. Curl, Article 51.
Mr. Moderator, I move we approve Article 51 as written in the warrant.
Thank you, Ms. Curl. With the advisory board recommendation?
This article is to amend the zoning code definitions to include biotechnology as a permitted use in the C6 district in hopes of attracting biotech businesses. The C6 district will be zoned as per the biotechnology definition as biosafety levels 1 and 2, which is the equivalent of high school and college chemistry labs.
Thank you, Ms. Curl. This is a zoning change recommended. Does the planning board have a recommendation? Mr. Roach.
Yes, the planning board recommends approval as biotechnology is an appropriate industry, which we, as a board, would welcome and as a town should welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion or debate with respect to Article 51? Article 51 is a zoning change. It requires a 2/3 vote. If you vote yes, you're voting in favor of amending the zoning bylaw to adopt the biotechnology definition. If you vote no, you're voting against it. Mr. Lutz, do you wish to speak?
I have a question. My understanding is that the sort of the more current term is life sciences, and I'm wondering if this is too narrow a definition, if anyone's considered that. Life science research includes things that are beyond biotechnology. I'm just concerned I'm not opposed to the idea that we would be pushing this kind of thing for C6, but I'm just wondering if it may be too narrow a definition.
Thank you, Mr. Lutz. Any further discussion for or against? Article 51 is printed in the warrant. You vote yes, you're voting to amend the zoning as printed. If you vote no, you're voting to keep the zoning as it is. It requires a 2/3 vote. All in favor of Article 51, say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. It is a unanimous vote. Just by way of housekeeping, at 9 o'clock, we will take a 5-minute recess of town meeting to have both a raffle of gift certificates and Red Sox tickets, and the selectmen have asked to have just a moment of time during the recess for anyone who wishes to remain in the hall to give you a recap or an overview of the governor's, House, and Senate budget, which was, the Senate budget was released today, preview of coming attractions. We'll have a 5-minute recess at that time on or about 9 o'clock this evening, also to support the Council on Aging bake sale outside. Article 52, Ms. Curl, Advisory Board.
Mr. Moderator, I move we defer Article 52 as written in the warrant until after Article 37.
Second.
Thank you. The motion's been made and seconded to defer Article 52 until after Article 37. In other words, to put it at the end of the warrant. Ms. Curl, with the recommendation?
A public hearing conducted by the Zoning Bylaw Committee is required to be completed prior to town meeting. A public hearing for this article is expected to be held before the June town meeting.
Thank you, Ms. Curl. Any further discussion or debate with respect to Article 52? Thank you. The motion before town meeting is to defer Article 52 until after Article 37. In other words, to put it at the end of the warrant to allow the Planning Board zoning hearing to occur. If you vote yes, you're voting to defer. To delay Article 52 until at the end of the warrant. If you vote no, we'll deal with Article 52 now. Requires a majority vote. All in favor of deferring Article 52, say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Article 52 is deferred until at the end of the town meeting warrant. Article 53, Ms. Curl, Advisory Board.
Mr. Moderator, I move we approve Article 53 as written in the warrant.
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Curl. With the Advisory Board recommendation?
This article amends the general bylaw by transferring the approval authority of earth removal permits from the Board of Selectmen to the Planning Board to better utilize their expertise. This amendment is supported by both boards.
Thank you very much, Ms. Curl. The motion before the town meeting is to approve Article 53 as printed in the warrant. Is there any further discussion or debate for or against Article 53, or any questions with respect to Article 53? It is a bylaw amendment. Is there any recommendation from the Town Bylaw Committee? Hearing none, Article 53 is before town meeting. A majority vote is required to amend the town's bylaws. If you vote yes, you're voting to amend the town bylaws to incorporate the proposed change as listed in Article 53. If you vote no, you're voting to keep the bylaw as it now exists. All in favor of Article 53, say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. It is a unanimous vote. Article 54, Mr. Birmingham.
Mr. Moderator, I move to approve Article 54 as printed in the warrant.
Thank you. Mr. Birmingham, motion's been made and seconded. The recommendation of the Advisory Board, please.
This article adopts current practices relative to the mitigation measures into our zoning bylaws.
Thank you. Any recommendation from the Planning Board? Mr. Roach, on a zoning matter.
Planning Board has submitted the article to advise future applicants for the requirements of mitigation in instances where a development creates situations in a community taxing municipal services or public safety, i.e. reconstruction of existing intersections, etc. The Planning Board establishes conditions in its decisions for the relief when needed after public hearing has concluded.
Thank you, Mr. Roach. Any further discussion, questions? Mr. Tallerman at the question microphone.
Yes, question maybe perhaps even for town council. I believe that there's been, my concern is that it can require a donation, and I'm not sure you can require a donation. And for example, if it was a donation of something of monetary value, I think that would normally get processed under a certain statute. I think DOR has taken a position that you couldn't treat it as such. So it seems to me that there could be some pitfalls there. If it's a requirement, let's call it a requirement, but I'm not sure it's entirely legal to call it a gift or a donation.
Thank you, Mr. Tallerman. Any further discussion or debate for or against? Article 54 is printed in the warrant. Mr. Tarazi at the red microphone.
Once again, we find ourselves walking barefoot out there in the cow pasture. What's wrong with this? I mean, I wish somebody else would see these things. What's wrong with this is that a developer can come into your community, and the developer can do things that will impact your community. They will impact you, possibly the value of your homes. But then if the developer is required to perhaps set up a shrine someplace to one of our town notables, or if the developer puts a sewer in at the other end of town, or puts a catch basin someplace else, that's mitigation. Well, at these meetings before, I've suggested that there's another word for that, but I am not allowed to use it. But I will say
Thank
that...
you, Mr. Tarazi. If we're not using that word, you may continue.
Oh, you're welcome. I would never use that word. I don't know how to spell it, so how can I use it? The bottom line here is that the mitigation process is, as far as I'm concerned, it's a flawed process, and if you've ever had a developer mitigate into your community and left you holding the bag, actually impacted by what was going on in your community, you wouldn't be happy about this article either.
Thank you, Mr. Tarazi. The question was raised on legality of Article 54. Town Council wish to opine?
I can respond. No
Are you on?
A couple of questions. On the question raised by the last speaker, there is a considerable amount of law that limits the ability of the board to exact mitigation for matters that really aren't directly related to solving the specific problems caused by that development. That's why the language sufficient to service the development project was inserted in this when we were evolving the language of the article. So I suspect the Attorney General will give us a caution that this has to be administered in such a way that it isn't used to just try to exact various unrelated mitigation measures to things that aren't related to specific impacts from the development. I think that the word donation may not be the best choice of words, but putting it in the zoning bylaw certainly doesn't direct the applicant to treat it in any particular way for tax purposes. I mean, what it's asking for is the possibility that the board can require the dedication of land to provide for roadway or intersection widening or improvements. I think probably the donation and or language could come out, but I don't think leaving it in there has any harmful effect.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. Town Council, any further discussion or debate with respect to Article 54? At the red microphone, ma'am, your name and your street.
Hi, my name is Pamela Russell. I live on North Street, and I'm certainly not terribly informed about planning and development, and I am new here, relatively. I used to live in Jamaica Plain. I lived on Allendale Street, Allendale Farm. I don't know if any of you are familiar with it. And the Allendale Estates were built. It was a huge, big, high-profile, very mega millions development. And Allendale Farm, there were some mitigations that were made. And years later, and still now, Allendale Farm is drastically impacted by the development of Allendale Estates, which is across the street from the farm. There was water, and supposedly they were building another conduit to carry groundwater, and things were not done properly, but that didn't come out until years later, and now fields are flooded that used to be growing fields, and mosquitoes are a major problem, and there's nobody to go back to. There's nobody to, it's a done deal. I was also involved with Jamaica Pond and the development that was attempted on Hellenic Hill. And I'm a little nervous, sorry. And a huge development company wanted to come in and build a development of the group quad housing on the hill overlooking Jamaica Pond. And they were going to mitigate because there were going to be impacting, there were going to be things that would impact the area. One, the site. Two, possible water problems. And the town took a really slow, long look and said, okay, this development would bring a lot of income, but eventually there were going to be problems. And if you're going to vote for this, you have to be aware, and I'm sure you are because you've been doing this a lot longer than I've even been aware of this, but problems that arise with developments can show up later. And the developer's gone. And so is the, so is the health of an environment. So that's
Thank you,
just
Ms.
my
Russell.
thought. Thank you.
Any further discussion or debate with respect to Article 54 at the green microphone? Ms. Langhauser.
Andrea Langhauser, newly elected to the Planning Board.
Speak into the microphone, please.
Andrea Langhauser, newly elected to the Planning Board. Pamela, welcome to Norfolk. If you read this article, you'll see that we're specifically saying that the mitigation is to address direct impacts to development concerns. While we are the Planning Board, this is we're actually putting this on the books now because it's a practice that we presently use. In one example, we often have a requirement for 2 sidewalks on either side of the street. We often waive that and allow only 1 sidewalk through the development so that we could use the money as mitigation to go into a town sidewalk fund so that instead of having 2 sidewalks on the new streets, we have money to put sidewalks on the old streets, which has been able to use that money so far. The other reason, this donation and dedication of land, that's usually directly related to traffic studies, where the traffic study is done for the development. It shows that if we allow the development, there's going to be some modification needed for the existing roads, and so we ask the developer to help us with that through giving us, possibly allowing him to give us land to straighten out roadway intersections and stuff like that. So it's directly related to impacts that we find through the development review, and it's to solve problems before they get constructed rather than come back later and try to fix them.
Thank you, Ms. Langhauser. At the red microphone for the second time, Mr. Tarazi.
I appreciate Mr. Hall's remarks and his enlightening us on what the mitigation would be all about. I would remind him, I would remind the body that the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And so while all of this might be well-intended, sometimes it doesn't work out that way. I have a few documents in my files that would dispute the good intentions of mitigation. Ms. Langhauser mentioned the sidewalks. Give one sidewalk away, put another sidewalk here. What about cases where a developer comes in and the developer is not in compliance with something? So the developer is let off the hook if, in fact, the developer will build a sidewalk, or we're back to name a shrine, or put up a plaque in the middle of town, or whatever. That's bad mitigation. And by leaving the door open for this is what I'm saying, is that we're... Tell the microphone. Oh, there we go. This, what we're leaving ourselves open for is the susceptibility of a lot.
Just speak up loudly, Mike. Yeah. Just speak loudly, Mr. Tarazi. Your microphone just cut out. Just speak loudly.
Because of the way she described it. Thanks, Mike.
1 minute, Mr. Tarazi.
Well, say again, sir?
1 minute.
Oh, okay.
Wrap up your
Well,
remarks.
actually, I think I was all done before I
Okay.
started, but
We
besides...
gave you the microphone. It was our first mistake, right?
Did I
Thank you,
get
Mr. Tarazi.
Did I get a timeout for the mic?
Very good. No, thank you, Mr. Tarazi. Any further discussion or debate on Article 54? Mr. Roach. We're burning the microphone.
Ron.
Thank you.
I just want to comment that I don't think there's a board in this town that has not approved something that isn't according to the either the zoning bylaws or the subdivision bylaws to benefit a developer for the sake of mitigation.
Thank you, Mr. Roach. Any further discussion or debate on Article 54? Article 54 is a zoning change, requires a two-thirds vote. If you vote yes, you're voting to adopt Article 54 as printed in the warrant. If you vote no, you're voting to keep the zoning as it currently is without this language. All in favor of Article 54, say aye. Aye. Opposed, no? No. It is a two-thirds vote. Article 55 was...
I'd like to make a motion to reconsider Article... the earth removal permit, number 53.
Motion has been made to reconsider Article 53. Is there a second? Second. Mr. Hathaway, the floor is yours. For what reason do you wish to amend to reconsider Article 53?
Simply for a typographical issue on Section K, subsection 4. At the very end of that paragraph, it says, of a permit for earth removal by the Board of Selectmen. I believe we delete of selectmen and just leave it by the board. Earlier in the article, this is obviously a permit that will now be approved by the planning board. Earlier in the article, we talked about just the board being the planning board, so I believe we can strike that. We will have an article that makes a little more sense.
Thank you, Mr. Hathaway. The motion has been made and seconded to reconsider Article 53 for purposes of going back to amend it to address a typographical error. If you vote yes, you're voting to go back to reconsider, in which case Article 53 will be back before town meeting. If you vote no, we'll continue apace. All in favor of reconsideration of Article 53, say aye. Aye. All opposed, say no. It is a unanimous vote. A majority vote is required. Article 53 is now before town meeting. Is there a motion to amend Article 53 as approved by town meeting?
Mr. Mallard? Mr. Mallard, I'd like to amend, as stated earlier, Section K, subsection 4, deleting the last two words of selectmen.
Thank you. On the motion has been made and seconded to delete the words of selectmen. So it would simply read application of a permit for earth removal by the board referring to the earlier reference to board, planning board. Is there any further discussion, Mr. Hathaway, in support of the motion?
No, sir.
Thank you. Ms. Russell at the question microphone.
Yeah, I voted on it before because I hadn't read through all of it, to be honest with you, and I just admit it. I want to ask a question about item D, if I may, since we are going back to it. What a gift. It's on page 40. For projects required, it says, wait a minute, I just want to understand this if I'm going to vote on it. So this is an exception. In other words, if a project requiring subdivision approval, site plan approval, or a special permit from the planning board, the earth removal permit shall be considered and approved, and no separate earth removal permit is necessary. What is there to keep, what is in motion, or what type of, what's there to keep tabs on a developer? Like, I live on North Street, and on Marshall Street we have a nightmare. A lot of earth was removed and a lot of trees, and there was no control there. And so if someone can just get an approval when they come before the planning board and say, here's my plan, it looks great on paper, if they don't have to go back again, who's going to keep tabs on them?
Thank you, Ms. Russell. Anybody wish to speak to that question or for or against Article 53? Mr. Roach, Planning Board.
Yes, in response to that, the planning board through the site plan process and also, through any subdivision process would be looking at such things as roadways, cuts and fills, detention areas, drainage infrastructure would come in, into play with any of these projects we're talking about. I don't think there's anybody in this room that isn't surprised about what happened on Main Street. And unfortunately, or Marshall Street, but also on Main Street. And I think that there's a fine line there where we actually can prevent a developer from developing his property and not developing his property. I can tell you the Main Street property, just like looking at that, the cuts and fills and the elevations that involve that project right there almost forced them into removing the amount of trees that they did to make those properties. And shake your head as all you want, but that's the truth.
Mr. Roach, direct your remarks to the moderator, please.
Yes,
Thank
sorry.
you.
And, but, the point is that we have consultants, we have reviews that go along with all our processes that address all these areas, and I don't think that it's necessary to go forward and to have the Board of Selectmen that simply, they're involved with the process, but they aren't. I mean, we're more involved with it as far as the site plan process, subdivision process than they are. We have the engineers, we have the consultants, and that's all I can say about it.
Thank you, Mr. Roach. Ms. Russell, for the second time on this motion.
I'm just wondering if there's no separate permit necessary, is there any way to keep tabs on developers as they proceed? So that what happened on Main Street, or, all right, maybe that isn't an issue, it looks pretty bad, but on Marshall Street, where there is drainage problems, and the trees were completely clear-cut and didn't have to be, and a lot of earth was removed. What is there to keep tabs on a developer and keep them honest and following a plan if they don't have to come back?
Thank you, Ms. Russell. Any further discussion or debate on Article 53? The amendment before town meeting is to amend to strike the words "of selectmen" out of Part K4, so it simply refers to the board. Any further discussion for or against Article 53? A question?
Mrs. Gleason, I have a question. It's related to this, but not that specific, so forgive me. I live on Main Street, and before they did the recent development, before that, the initial one, they took a lot of sand out of there. They took more sand out of there than they were allowed to. There's no debate about that. I mean, I saw 16-wheeler trucks going out of that, one right after another, after another, after another, day after day after day. The Board of Selectmen was notified, the police were notified, but nobody ever saw it because they were busy or they couldn't make it there. So my question is, what recourse do you have to make sure that the earth that's removed matches the earth that they had to take out to build a foundation? What is the penalty for not conforming to the special permits that you grant?
Thank you, Ms. Gleason. Any further discussion, debate? Anyone who's able to answer that question? Anybody at the no microphone? Mr. Boucher, the question? We have a town council with respect to the question presented.
I'll take a shot at answering both those questions. The enforcement provisions allowed to towns under the general laws for general bylaws are generally not that great. So by incorporating these permit provisions into other zoning permit provisions, such as special permitting or site plan approval, I think we actually obtain better enforcement opportunities through zoning, through the building inspector. So I think the purpose of combining them is not only streamlining, but also to select the option that's more enforceable. The other issue is you will see that this allows the board to require a bond. And typically for a significant earth removal project, it allows the board to obtain peer review, to hire an engineer to review the plans, and to require a bond to make sure the property is restored to its original condition, or to the, or not to the original condition, but to the condition shown on the plans that the board approves. So if too much is taken out and work has to be done in order to bring the property up to the grades that were approved, then there's a bond available to the town to make sure that that happens. So the best way, I think, to enforce something like this is through the bonding process rather than trying to take somebody to district court and fine them $200. And I think that's how this is conceived to be enforced.
Thank you, Town Council. The motion before town meeting is to approve Article 53 as printed, deleting the references to "of selectmen" from Part 4. Mr. Boucher at the question microphone.
Yes, I have a question and possibly another change. On page 42, L, termination of a permit, Section 2, all applications for removal of a special permit will require a public hearing as specified in Section I of the earth removal bylaw. I believe that should be Section G.
Thank you, Mr. Boucher. This is an article sponsored by the Planning Board. Will the Planning Board accept Mr. Boucher's observation as a friendly amendment? In Part L2, the reference to Section I, to change that to Section G, referring to the public hearing under the earth removal bylaw. Mr. Rhodes for the Planning Board?
Yes, we
It'll be
accept that.
accepted as a friendly amendment. L2 now refers by agreement to Section G rather than Section I. Mr. Boucher, the floor is yours.
To give proper credit, that's Mrs. Boucher's observation.
Thank you, Mr. and Mrs. Boucher. Any further discussion or debate with respect to Article 53, now before town meeting? Mr. Tallerman at the question microphone.
Quick question following up on Mr. Hall's comment, which was a good one. If this is going to be subsumed and essentially inapplicable as a general bylaw when there's either a special permit, subdivision, or site plan process, are all of these requirements, and maybe it's a question for the planning board as well, to be utilized by the planning board during that process? And if that is the case, in your opinion, might the Attorney General view this as essentially a zoning provision, thereby requiring a different quantum of vote and everything else? It just seems that if we have all these requirements in site plan, special permit, great, because then we could use them. If not, then I don't think they have the same tools that are in the earth removal permit to accomplish everything that's in this bylaw.
Thank you. On Town Council, on a question, to answer a question on the quantum of vote for Article 53?
Well, it would be more than the quantum of vote because there would be a planning board special public hearing requirement. So, I mean, we're not going to say that if the Attorney General considers it to be the equivalent of a zoning bylaw, we're not going to say that by a 2/3 vote this evening. It's a good question. I guess I would interpret it that the permit functions as both a zoning function and a function under the general bylaw, but it could be clearer.
Thank you, Town Council. Any further discussion or debate on Article 53 with the changes noted? That is, deleting the reference to "of selectmen" from K4 at the last line, just referring to earth removal by the board, referring to the planning board. And then in Section L2, changing the reference in the warrant from Section I to Section G to correct that typographical error. Any further discussion or debate on Article 53? It requires a majority vote as a bylaw amendment. If you vote yes, you're voting to amend the bylaw to adopt Article 53 as noted. If you vote no, you're voting to keep the bylaws as they currently exist. All in favor of Article 53, say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. It is a majority vote, 2/3 vote for the record. Article 55. Article 55 is a consent calendar item. Ms. Curl for the advisory board.
Mr. Moderator, I move we approve Article 55 as written in the warrant.
Thank you. Recommendation from the advisory board?
This article designates a portion of the Highland Lake property to be named the Fowles Memorial Park Reserve in recognition of the Fowles family for their generous donation of the land.
Thank you, Ms. Curl. This was a consent calendar item. It was held. Mr. Tarazi, is there any debate you'd like to have on this?
Your soothing voice lulled me into a little nap there. I have to ask a question first. Is this the Fales family that was Fales Machinery? Does anybody know?
No.
Mr. Tarazi, the floor is
No.
yours. Just a moment. The floor is Mr. Tarazi's. Mr. Tarazi?
Okay, because what that does is structure the way I'm going to make my comments. It's called Highland Lake now. It's considered a reservation of sorts under the one name of Highland Lake. I'm sure that the Fales family, in fact, I knew the Fales family from Fales Machine, and in fact, one of my friends was, a neighbor was one of the Fales. But I don't think in gratitude to anything the Fales family has done, we should rename Highland Lake. Highland Lake is Highland Lake. It's been part of our community for 100 and some odd years, and just to rename it just for the sake of changing a name, you got to draw some lines someplace. Why don't we put a monument up someplace and call that the Fales Monument? Or the next piece of property they give us, or go back to one of the older pieces of property, name that after the Fales. But I do not believe we should change the name of Highland Lake because it is part of our heritage.
Thank you, Mr. Tarazi. At the green microphone, anybody wish to speak in favor of Article 55? Just state your name and your street, please.
Yes, I'm Barbara Bartholomew. I live on King Street. And I would ask the town meeting to vote in favor of Article 55 to designate a Fales Memorial Park at Highland Lake. This park will be the fulfillment of a promise that was made by the town of Norfolk 66 years ago, when Article 9 was unanimously adopted by the town meeting in March of 1943. They voted that night to accept 13.5 acres of land being donated by Bertha Fales for a Fales Memorial Park. We cannot recover the original tract of land that she donated because in 1980, the United States government took it by eminent domain to become part of the Charles River Natural Storage Area under the administration of the United States Army Corps of Engineers. We can, however, create this park in the northeast corner of the Highland Lake property. There will finally be a Fales Memorial Park, as Bertha intended when she donated her land, and the town will fulfill the promise it made 66 years ago when it accepted her gift.
Thank you very much. Any further argument against? Any further argument against Article 55? Further argument in favor of Article 55? It requires a majority vote. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. It is a unanimous vote. Article 56 was also held from the consent calendar. Ms. Curl for the advisory board.
Mr. Moderator, I move we approve Article 56 as written in the warrant.
Thank you, Ms. Curl. The recommendation of the advisory board.
This is a standard article at town meeting which requests the funding of $35,000 from Community Preservation Committee revenues to cover CPC administrative and operating costs.
Thank you. Would the person who asked to hold Article 56 come forward and speak against or in favor of it as you wish? Any further discussion with respect to Article 56, which was held from the consent calendar? Requires a majority vote. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. It is a unanimous vote. Article 57, Ms. Curl for the advisory board.
Mr. Moderator, I move the town vote pursuant to Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 44B, to reserve $65,217, which includes the state match, from fiscal year 2010 CPC fund revenues for the future appropriation of open space creation, acquisition, and preservation.
Thank you, Ms. Curl. The advisory board recommendation, please.
This is a standard article at town meeting to reserve per state mandate the minimum amount of 10% required to fund open space.
Thank you. Any further arguments in favor of the article by the Community Preservation Committee? Any arguments against Article 57? Article 57 requires a majority vote. If you vote yes, you're voting to appropriate those funds, as indicated in the motion, to fund the Community Preservation Fund operating budget. You vote no, you're voting not to fund it with those amounts of money as proposed. All in favor of Article 57, say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. It is a unanimous vote. Article 58, Ms. Curl, Advisory Board.
Mr. Moderator, I move the town vote pursuant to Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 44B, to reserve $65,217 from fiscal 2010 CPC fund revenues for the future appropriation of affordable housing creation, preservation, and support. This, too, does have the match from the state.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any further recommendation, Ms. Curl?
This is a standard article at town meeting as per state mandated, the minimum amount of 10% of CPC funds. The town is required to reserve for affordable housing, development, and support.
Any further discussion or debate? Questions? For or against? Article 58. Mr. Boucher. Mr. Boucher at the question microphone, the white microphone.
I believe the motion was made that this $65,217 includes the match from the state. Do we have the match from the state?
Question, Mr. Hathaway, Town Administrator.
We have what is an well, we have, the last match we received is in the fall, this past fall, which was a match of fiscal year 2008. We're projecting through the Department of Revenue and through the Community Preservation Committee, not our committee, the state, that we will receive 29% next year in the first round, and then we will receive an additional 29% match of all of our surcharge, and then an additional $43,000 in the second round. We're not sure what we're going to receive in the third round. So the number that you see represents 134. The grand total of a match would be 177,342. The total of 29% plus the 43,000.
Thank you, Mr. Boucher at the question microphone.
So if the state reneges on the match, are we still bound by these figures?
Mr. Hathaway, Town Administrator.
We can amend it in the fall or next spring. There are actually a lot of towns that don't do this. They reserve it as part of the accounting process. This was a debate we had 4 or 5 years ago to have these articles. Either way, we're going to reserve 10%.
Thank you, Mr. Hathaway. Any further discussion or debate? For or against? Questions on Article 58? Article 58 requires a majority vote. If you vote yes, you're voting to appropriate the money as stated in the motion. If you vote no, you're voting not to do that. All in favor of Article 58 is moved, say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. It is a unanimous vote. Article 59, Ms. Curl, Advisory Board.
Mr. Moderator, I move the town vote pursuant to Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 44B, to reserve $65,217 from fiscal year 2010 CPC fund reserves for the future appropriation towards the acquisition, preservation, rehabilitation, and restoration of historic resources.
Thank you, Ms. Curl. The recommendation of the Advisory Committee.
This is a standard article at town meeting as per state mandated the minimum amount of 10% of CPC funds the town is required to reserve for the preservation of historic resources.
Thank you, Ms. Curl. Any further discussion or debate with respect to Article 59? Any questions on Article 59? It requires a majority vote. If you vote yes, you're voting in favor of appropriating the money as indicated on the screen. If you vote no, you're voting against that. All in favor of Article 59, say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. It is a unanimous vote. Article 60, Ms. Curl, Advisory Board.
Mr. Moderator, I move we approve Article 60 as written in the warrant.
Thank you, Ms. Curl. With the recommendation from the Advisory Board.
This article allocates CPC fund revenues in the amount not to exceed $60,000 to support a Norfolk affordable housing subsidy program. The recipients would be required to qualify under HUD guidelines for moderate to low-income Norfolk families and families of municipal employees.
Thank you, Ms. Curl. Any further debate for or against? Any questions with respect to Article 60? Mr. Tarazi at the red microphone.
Thank you, sir. Now, as I understand it, when we vote on these allocations into the affordable housing excuse the expression, slush fund, that that the money goes in there. So part of the comment here is a question of, how much do we have in there now? About 360,000?
Just to state your piece, and I'll get back to you after your question's been answered. Go ahead.
Okay.
The floor is yours.
Oh, all right. Well, again, it's 260, 360. If the money is being transferred as we vote on it tonight, that this would be another $60,000 put into the affordable housing, what do they call it? The affordable housing subsidy fund. I thought that was a down payment fund, actually, but maybe I'm mixing this up with something else.
Thank you, Mr. Tarazi. Mr. Hathaway, Town Administrator.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you're thinking about a couple of different programs we have. We had an article last year that transferred money into the Municipal Housing Trust Fund. And that was to first, for the trustees to have a request, and that was about $300,000, if I'm not mistaken. This program is the annual program we've done. In the past, it's been $100,000. That gets renewed every year. They've had some approvals. They haven't spent the whole $100,000 each year, but on June 30th, that money then goes back into the CPC slush fund, to use your word, goes back into the reserves of the CPC fund, waiting for appropriation again. So for 2010, they only have $60,000 to spend on this program.
Thank you, Mr. Hathaway. At the green microphone, Ms. Langhauser, do you wish to speak to Article 60?
Yes, actually, I wanted to speak to Mike Tarazi's question. And at the end of last fiscal year, we had $206,000 in, not the slush fund, but in the state-mandated reserve account for affordable housing.
Thank you, Ms. Langhauser. Any further discussion at the red microphone? Mr. Tarazi for the second time.
Jack Hathaway, Mr. Hathaway answered the question, actually. It was the $100,000 that we've been putting in every year, but I didn't realize that's why the question. So it does get, at the end of the year, it does get put back into the regular CPC general fund.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Tarazi. Any further discussion or debate on Article 60? Article 60 is requires a majority vote. If you vote yes, you're voting to fund the amount as listed in the warrant. If you vote no, you're voting not to do that. All in favor of Article 60, say aye. Aye. Opposed, no? It is a majority vote. Article 61, Ms. Curl, Advisory Board.
Mr. Moderator, I move we approve Article 61 as written in the warrant.
Thank you, Ms. Curl. Advisory Board recommendation.
This article allocates CPC fund revenues in an amount not to exceed $8,000 to complete the purchase of the Campbell Street property to develop pedestrian and parking access to the Highland Lake Recreation Area.
Thank you, Ms. Curl. Any further recommendations of the Community Preservation Committee in support of Article 61? Any opposition to Article 61 or questions from anyone in the town meeting? Town meeting is required to have a two-thirds vote on Article 61, which is to acquire property for the town using CPC funds. If you vote yes, you're voting to purchase the property for the amount stated. If you vote no, you're voting not to do that. Requires a two-thirds vote. All in favor of Article 61, say aye. Aye. Opposed, no? It is a unanimous vote. Article 62, Ms. Curl, Advisory Board.
Mr. Moderator, I move we approve Article 62 as written in the warrant.
Thank you. Ms. Curl, a recommendation of the Advisory Board?
This article allocates CPC fund revenues in the amount of $10,000 to rehabilitate and restore historic resources at the Pondville Cemetery located on Everett Street.
Thank you. Any further discussion or debate for or against Article 62? Excuse me, Article 62. Yes, Ms. Pine.
I have a few pictures on the PowerPoint of the Pondville Cemetery. This project was brought before CPC by Butch Vito of DPW, and you'll see some pictures of the Virgil Pond Crypt. He was a very important gentleman who was from Pondville, and he donated this crypt to that cemetery around 1900. It's in pretty seriously deteriorating condition, probably even could collapse if it's neglected. We contacted a preservation consultant who specializes in restoration of this kind of stonework, and she made a bid, and we think we're going to go with that if this passes. Can you show the next slide, please? You can see how the surface is scaling, and it's in pretty bad shape. This was unanimously approved by the CPC, and it is a historic site, so this is going to be funded with historic preservation funds. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Pine. Any further discussion or debate with respect to Article 62? Article 62 requires a majority vote. If you vote in favor, you're voting to allocate the monies as stated in the warrant. If you vote no, you're voting not to do that. All in favor of Article 62, say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. It is a unanimous vote. At this time, town meeting will be in make it a 10-minute recess. During the recess, we'll begin first with a raffle. We'll begin first with a report by the selectmen of the budget condition, and then we'll proceed with a raffle.
Just a very brief discussion. Hopefully all of you saw this handout that was out on the desk out there.